Hi, this is a video about going beyond reasonable expectation and understanding how much you can do, and almost an understanding of an obsession, and understanding what you can reasonably expect and how much you can reasonably do to mitigate against this innate unfairness in life, and how we can understand the circumstances surrounding the unfairness that we experience, and how we can mitigate against it, and what we can reasonably expect based on the circumstances that we understand around us, and what we can do to mitigate against them, because you never know what might come in handy. Something might come in handy, like I wrote down 5 different ideas. Maybe if I write down 5 more, but then you'll think maybe 5 more. And comes almost from a form of psychology, but it's also a form of understanding, well, maybe this can help me. Maybe I can be spending my time elsewhere. Maybe I can do more here or there to mitigate against something. Maybe this will happen. Maybe this will help me in the future with something else. Maybe this will help me in the future with this. You never know where to take the limit to the end, and other than some kind of boundary that you create for yourself, some other kind of I guess in a way I could use some kind of boundary based on an understanding of what's reasonably accepted based on the expectations that are can be reasonably perceived to happen, create based on a cognitive dissonance, and understanding how far you should go or reasonably should go, or some kind of emotional thing gets in the way, and understanding you can only go so far, and doing this and taking action and understanding this, sort of like you can only sit there and go so far. You can only understand what's going to happen to a certain extent. Something's going to happen, and you can only do so much to mitigate against it. Maybe if a person wrote 5 more sentences, wrote something 5 more times, they wouldn't have walked out soon enough, walked out of their house soon enough to get shot because someone was just happened to have walked by. Obviously, that was going to happen anyway. Because the world that we're living in, the universe, the reality we're living in, is a deterministic universe. But just understanding of, obviously, all this stuff is irrelevant once you recognize, obviously, the idea isn't relevant. We're still playing out our role, and we're still living by our past experiences. We're still understanding. We all have these memes in our head. We all have these understanding, these internal ethics that drive us forward based on the mechanism that built us up, and all the learning and all the evolution that's gotten us to where we are now. But just say that a mechanism, at least from our own perception and understanding, that back to the example I was talking about with a person, if they just wrote, you can only go so far with your reasonable expectation of understanding. Maybe if you sit here and I make another video, I might reach the point. How much can I expect to make before I finally feel like I'm going to reach the point? The outcome will obviously present itself. Something will happen either now or when it happens, but something's going to happen. This is happening right now, and something will happen in the future, and I can only have some reasonable expectation to how far I have to go. Obviously, how far I have to go is just a notion in my head based on the deterministic universe that we're living in, leading to something else, leading to the action, all based off this whole mechanism of things moving inside of a closed system, which I would say is the universe that we're living in. And it doesn't matter; it's irrelevant to the point. But based on our own perception, we can only go so far. Something's going to happen anyway, and we can only go so far with our expectation to reasonably expect something and mitigate against something. And writing those 5 extra, or doing something more, doing something less, or sitting here only doing something more, the reasonable expectation you can expect out of that, and creating an understanding from your own personal experience. The more experience you have, the more you're going to understand the reasonable expectation, the limits of based off of experience, and all these kinds of silly concepts of going on and understanding from a personal point of view, and how you can understand how the mechanism works, and how you can try your best to make sure that the mechanism, that understanding that, almost in a form of psychology and understanding, you shouldn't look at it from a point of view where you have to sit there and obsessively try to make sure you can consider all possibilities. We have to cover yourself. You have to cover all bases by, maybe you have to sit here and do this and do that and do this, but maybe all you're doing is creating it worse. You never know, but you can have some reasonable expectation based on some kind of projection based on your goal or the expectation or of a goal or accomplishment or projection of something that you expect to accomplish, and the negative outcomes based on the zero-sum game that we could possibly, based on this unfairness that we experience, trying to mitigate against it by sitting here and thinking, maybe if I write one more sentence, this can help. This will get my point across even more. Writing a speech for something, maybe if let me sit here and think for 5 more minutes and think if I could think of anything special, it might pay off. You never know. Something's going to happen anyway. If you don't end up thinking it fleetingly, the process is going to happen. Obviously, we're just living through the fleeting process of movement going forward. It's a perceptual thing I think we could pick up on, at least from any reasonable understanding and perception and recognizing. If you just have any a short amount of self-awareness and understanding of the game that we're playing. We can only try our best to reasonably expect to a certain extent. We're going to play the game the way we're going to play the game, and usually these visceral feelings of going on and going on are going to be something that's going to happen looking back once we've done all the things that we're going to do, if we've gone to a certain extent. And so the thing that we expect or the thing that we don't expect based on our expectations that happen to begin with have happened. We can only look back and say, that worked out. Things didn't happen any other way. Things are going to happen one way. The projection that I think that there's a choice is only in my head. The thinking, whatever I'm going to do is what I'm going to do. Looking back and how I did it is irrelevant. It's led me to where I am now, and the reaction that happened and the expectation, the reality based on the projection in your head. That's the projection irrelevant to the projection that you had in your head based on the reality that of looking at the past. And is something, obviously the projection you had was in the past, sort of like the projection now you have of looking back at the past and understanding the past is in your head. And so it's a head game that we're playing. It's all we are is psychologies, and that's another point in making and understanding. This is what we're psychologies. That's the thing that's driving us. That's the thing that makes life worth living, and so on and so forth. It makes a sentient game work. It stems from our psychologies. So we can only reasonably expect so much, and the thing's going to happen anyway. And once it's happened, it's already happened. And what's the expectation and projection that we had to begin with based on that previous obsession or the previous thing that we were doing to maybe mitigate against something, and that's all we're doing is mitigating. The idea of mitigating, maybe if I write one more sentence or trying to be more exceptional or create something that's better, you can only go so far in the expectations that you could go. And obviously once something happens, the fleeting state of existence would obviously deem the way it happened as the way it's going to, well, once it's happened, it's already happened, and there's no way to change it. And that's the proof of the deterministic nature of the universe, the unfairness that we experience, and how there's nothing we can do about this game that we're playing, and that we're trying to mitigate against the unfairness, and we shouldn't based on our own driving forces, based on these crude mechanisms controlling our psychology as well, being subjected to psychology, the physiology of these games, of this idea of obsession and all sorts of things like that. The thing that drives us to a reasonable expectation of understanding the game that we're playing, and the expectation that we have is just a thing that we're playing out. And we can only reasonably expect so much from a philosophy point of view, from me projecting something onto you so that you can understand and maybe convince you of an idea, in certain explanations, and how explanations can obviously skew one thing from one way or another. And explanations, what I can say, how I say it, the very semantics of the way I say things can obviously have a different effect on you. And that's obviously the only importance in understanding these concepts, is the semantics in which you portray these concepts, and how things can change based on the experiences and the reasonable expectations you can have based on the obsessions that you experience, and trying to project that and explain it to others, and hopefully have that have a cause and effect based on the previous experiences, hopefully to create a better point in explaining these experiences. So I hope that made enough sense. I don't want to drive the point home anymore. I don't want to become redundant, so I think I made the point good enough. I may have babbled on a little too long, but I do appreciate it, and until next time, bye. Bye.